Was Thomas Boleyn the ultimate puppet master, a ruthless father who pushed his daughters into the king's bed for power? That's the story we've been told for centuries. But today, we're going to peel back the layers of Tudor propaganda and ask a different question. What if he was just a father trying to survive in a world of wolves? Let's uncover the truth about the man behind the infamous Boleyn women. To understand Thomas Boleyn, we first need to understand where he came from. He wasn't born into the top tier of the aristocracy. His family had wealth, yes, built on the wool trade, but they were essentially city merchants who had climbed into the gentry. Thomas was ambitious, smart, and a gifted linguist. He didn't just inherit his position. He earned it through sheer hard work and diplomatic skill. He served Henry VIII, and then his son, Henry VIII, undertaking crucial missions across Europe. He was a self-made man in a world where birthright was everything. This drive and intelligence are key to understanding his later actions. He knew how to play the game because he'd deep been fighting his way up the ladder his entire life. One of the biggest arguments against Thomas is that he pimped out his daughters. But his investment in Anne's education tells a different story. He didn't just prepare her for a good marriage in England. He sent her abroad to one of the most sophisticated courts in Europe, the court of Margaret of Austria. Regent of the Netherlands. This was an incredible and expensive opportunity. Anne received a first-class education, learning languages, music, and courtly etiquette. This was on the action of a man looking for a quick payout by marrying his daughter off to the highest bidder. This was a long-term investment in her future, preparing her for a powerful, strategic alliance. Not just a place in a king's bed. He was building her into a formidable woman in her own right. No, let's talk about Mary Bolton. The story goes that Thomas happily sent her to the French court where she became the mistress of King Francis I. But the evidence suggests the opposite. When rumors of Mary's relationship with Francis reached him, Thomas was horrified. He promptly recalled her to England. Why? To protect the family's reputation. This action directly contradicts the idea that he was a man who would use his daughters' bodies for political favor. If he was the monster, history paints him as he would have encouraged the affair, hoping to gain influence with the French king. Instead, he put his family's honor first. Of course, Mary's romantic life didn't get any less complicated back in England. She soon caught the eye of King Henry VIII and became his mistress. Did Thomas orchestrate this? It's highly unlikely. By this point, Henry was an all-powerful monarch. If he wanted a woman, he took her. Thomas Courtier, still on the rise, would have been powerless to stop him. In fact, he reportedly expressed his deep unhappiness about the situation. He knew the dangers. A king's mistress was a temporary position, often ending in disgrace. He had just saved one daughter from a royal affair in France, only to have another fall into one at home. It was a nightmare, not a master plan. This brings us to Anne and Henry. The popular narrative claims Thomas pushed Anne into the king's path, coaching her on how to ensnare him. But contemporary sources, especially letters from the French ambassador, paint a very different picture. When Henry first proposed marriage to Anne, Thomas was vehemently against it. He didn't just politely object. He reportedly flew into a rage, even feigning madness to try and stop the king's pursuit. He screamed that he would rather see Anne dead than married to Henry. Why such a strong reaction? Think about it from his perspective. He had already seen one daughter, Mary, used and cast aside by the same king. He knew Henry's character, his charm, but also his ruthlessness and his short attention span. He was also a religious man who understood the monumental sin of trying to put aside a lawful queen. He saw this not as an opportunity, but as a path to certain ruin. He wasn't thinking about a crown. He was thinking about the potential destruction of his child and his entire family. So what changed? Why did he eventually support the marriage? The answer is simple. He had no choice. Anne herself was determined. She was in love with the king, or at least with the idea of being queen, and Henry was utterly obsessed. Once Thomas realized that the marriage was inevitable, that both the king and his own daughter were set on this course, he had to adapt or be destroyed. To oppose the king's will openly would have meant treason, execution, and the downfall of the Bulletins. So he did what any savvy courtier would do. He switched tactics. If he couldn't stop it, he would support it and try to guide it, hoping to protect his family as best he could. Once he was on board, Thomas reaped the rewards. As his daughter's star rose, so did his. He was showered with titles and power, becoming Earl of Wiltshire and Earl of Orand. He was appointed Lord Privy, one of the most powerful positions in the kingdom. During this time, he wasn't just a passive beneficiary, he was an active player. He was instrumental in the downfall of his great rival, Cardinal Wolsey, ruthlessly pursuing the man who had stood in the way of Anne's rise. This shows he was no saint. He was a hardened political operator who could be just as ruthless as his enemies when he needed to be. He was playing the Game of Thrones, and he was playing to win. But the game has a brutal ending. In May 1536, the world Thomas had built came crashing down. In a shocking turn of events, Queen Anne and her brother George Boleyn were arrested on fabricated charges of treason, adultery, and in just, Thomas was utterly powerless. He was part of the court that had to watch, frozen in horror, as his two beloved children were condemned to die. Imagine the agony of that moment. The titles, the power, the wealthy, all meant nothing. He was forced to sit on the jury that condemned other men alongside his children. A move likely made under duress to save his own skin. Within a few short weeks, he lost everything that mattered. His son and daughter were beheaded. His influence vanished, and his family name was destroyed. After the execution of Anne and George, Thomas Boleyn became a ghost at court. Henry stripped him of his position as Lord Privy Seal and other titles. He was allowed to live, a broken man, but his power was gone. He was a constant, uncomfortable reminder of the woman the king was desperate to forget. He continued to serve Henry in minor capacities, likely because he had no other choice. To retire from court might have been seen as a sign of disapproval, which could have been fatal. So he stayed a shadow of his former self until his death in 1539 inches, his will. He left the bulk of his remaining estate not to his arranged wife, but to his granddaughter Anne's daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I. It was perhaps his final act of loyalty to the child he had lost. So who was Thomas Boleyn? He was not the one-dimensional monster of popular fiction, nor was he a blameless saint. He was a complex, ambitious man, a product of his time. He was a loving father who invested in his children's futures, but also a ruthless politician who fought for his family's advancement. He tried to prevent the catastrophe of Anne's marriage to Henry, but when he failed, he embraced it for survival and profit. In the end, he was a man who flew too close to the sun. He played the ultimate game and lost in the most tragic way possible. The story of Thomas Boleyn is a stark reminder that in the cutthroat world of the Tudor court, even a father's love couldn't protect his children from the whims of a king. Thank you so much for watching. So, what do you think? Was Thomas a villain or a victim of circumstance? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. See you next time.